Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Extreme heat continues to blanket the province with temperature records falling in many areas and even warmer weather in the forecast. So how can we protect the most vulnerable during such extreme heat? And in our second half, we'll speak with environmental advocate and author Sheila Harrington about her new book, Voices for the Islands. I'm Amy Bell, in for Michelle Elliott, and this is BC Today. Thanks for joining us on radio, TV, and on live stream. You can call us now with our top story. What can we do to keep those most at risk safe during this heat? Our number is 604-669-3733. You can also call us at 1-800-825-5950 or hit pound 690. Our email, bctoday@cbc.ca. And yes, as you well know, it was a scorching weekend with many struggling to find any relief from the heat. But could even warmer weather still be in store? Well, for that answer, we are joined once again by our science and climate specialist, Darius Madavi. Hello, Darius.
Hey, Amy.
You're a busy man already today. Everybody wants to know what's happening. How long are we going to stay this hot?
Quite a while. No end in sight, really. So it peaks tomorrow and Wednesday.
Right.
Temperatures start to moderate a little bit, especially in the north, where temperatures come down quite a bit, but even here in the south on Thursday. But it's definitely a more significant difference for the north. Some places dropping from the low 30s down to the 20s, like Fort Nelson, Fort St. John, whereas here in the south, we're only dropping a couple degrees on Thursday. So not too much relief. And if you look at the forecast for most places in the southern interior, yes, and here on the coast, temperatures not expected to drop anytime soon, not expecting any rain on the way. So that low fire danger that we've been enjoying in southern BC so far this year, that has very quickly evaporated and is not expected to make a return anytime soon.
Yeah, and even for people that are loving the weather and heading to the beach, there is that worry of the fires that everybody seems to have in the province. What sort of temperatures were we seeing over the weekend in areas?
Easily into the mid 30s, some places getting even above that, especially with the humidex values factored in. For instance, today, I know that if you take a look at the Environment Canada forecast for Vancouver, it's going to tell you that it's going to be 27 degrees, which is hot, but that's for by the water. So that's hot for Vancouver Airport. You have to add around 5 or 6 degrees if you want to look at inland Vancouver, and then add another 5 or 6 degrees on top of that for the humidex. So it's going to feel like 37, 38 degrees in places like Abbotsford today, and inland sections of Metro Vancouver. If you're in the interior, going to feel like 40 degrees in some places, probably, especially getting into tomorrow, maybe even more places seeing 40 degrees. That is extremely hot, even though there won't be any humidity, and it's a dangerous temperature. But 40 degrees is sort of this number that, you know, it sounds really hot and impressive. If you're in the mid 30s, that can still be just as dangerous as 40 degrees if you're not taking precautions. So over the weekend, many people already experiencing that heat. It's only going to get hotter over the next couple days.
And it seems to have almost a sort of cumulative effect. Like you have these hot days, but if you don't get any chance, any break in between it, it's almost like your body is exhausted from the heat to a certain degree. What sort of impact does that have on people with this extreme heat?
Yes, that's a great point, especially because we had such a cool May and June. I was just watching a press conference from Environment Canada where they really highlighted the fact that we haven't really had a chance to acclimate to the warmer weather.
Yeah.
We kind of had a really big swing into this hot weather. So usually, you know, you get some of that transition period to sort of adjust to the heat. We didn't really have that this time. So please be extra cautious with this heat wave in particular. Heat stroke, heat exhaustion are both real possibilities for people. Be aware of those and be aware of the signs like sweating versus no sweating. People feeling flushed. Be aware of all those things and make sure to check in on people around you who are probably more vulnerable to the heat. Yeah. That can be really important and honestly a lifesaver. And all the things that you would normally do when there is a heat wave, if you have air conditioning, this is the time to use it. I know that many people are reluctant to turn it on. This is one of those times where it's worth the rise in the electricity bill.
I think so.
For sure. If you have, if you live in a south-facing apartment, if you have friends who have a north-facing apartment, probably better to hang out there if you can. Small things like that really do end up making a big difference when it comes to heat, this much heat.
Oh, very much so. I also noticed seemed to be a lot of extra people in the frozen food aisle at Safeway this weekend.
That's an interesting
Maybe
observation.
if you are in a pinch, you can just go hang out by the frozen waffles. And I do know that you like to head down to the beach, so certainly beach weather, everything's good down there for you.
Oh, yes. Very, very beachy weather. I was down at the beach yesterday, and I did get a sunburn. I got 2 into my book, and I was lying on my stomach the whole time and burned my back. So please wear sunscreen. That's something that
UV
I'll tell
index,
you
is it high?
firsthand. It is very high, pretty much across the province. No cloud in sight.
Nope.
The sun is just going to be burning down across all of BC. So don't do what I did. Please heed my warnings. Wear sunscreen.
Do I have to come give you the sunscreen lecture that I give my kids after the show?
Perhaps.
Yeah, I'll
that
be
might
at your
help.
desk later. Okay. Darius, thank you so much.
Thanks,
I
Amy.
know you'll be busy over the next couple of days, so much appreciated. Darius Madavi is our CBC Climate and Science Specialist. It is 12:12 here, and this is BC Today. Environment Canada says, of course, the peak of this heat wave is expected tomorrow. And in the lower mainland, those without homes are being encouraged to go to cooling centres. Nicole Mucci is the communications director with Union Gospel Mission that serves the downtown east side. She spoke this morning to Early Edition host Stephen Quinn.
So in those areas where there isn't a lot of green space, where there isn't a lot of anything to help create shade or coolness, we know that the temperature, even if the forecast says 30, it might actually be upwards of 36, 37 because it's so much hotter. And so we have our teams doing that, trying to do some street outreach, connecting with folks, making sure that they have those items in need. If anybody's in distress, connecting them with medical professionals, trying to guide people towards cooling centers, trying to get them towards our community center or to our Cornerstone Center to get them inside. We also have a mobile mission rescue vehicle, which is focused primarily on outreach services. So trying to connect folks who are in encampments or experiencing more hidden homelessness throughout Metro Vancouver, even towards Richmond or North Van, and sometimes in parts of the Fraser Valley as well. We provide slightly different services. And so we don't have like doctors or nurses or medical professionals in our vehicle, but we do have outreach workers who are able to offer rides to bring people in away from the heat and try to get them towards cooling centers. Yeah.
Nicole Mucci is the communications director with United Gospel Mission that serves Vancouver's downtown east side. And with the heat wave settling in across much of BC, many people are figuring out ways to stay cool. In Kamloops, temperatures hit 40 degrees Celsius. Shelley Joyce dropped by an apartment complex for low-income seniors to find out how they're coping.
Laura Douglas is 72 and prepared for the heat. She took advantage of an offer from BC Hydro to get this portable air conditioning unit for her one-bedroom suite.
I turn it on. If I stand right in front of it, it's cool. It was 78, and it took over an hour to bring it down to 74. My bedroom, I think, is too warm for sleeping. So I don't have a portable fan. I may have to get one.
Not all of these apartments have air conditioning units. Many tenants are approaching the heat wave with humor and ingenuity. Laura Douglas is prepared to sleep on the couch.
And apologies for that. We were having some audio issues. We'll take a call now from Cody in Trail. Hi, Cody.
Hello, Amy. How are you?
I'm doing well. Are you managing to stay cool?
Yes, I am. And I wanted to say first off, apologies to you and your colleagues for the loss of Rick Cluff. What an amazing gentleman he was, and I'm sure you were very fortunate enough to be his right-hand man for many years, and
yes.
so I just offer my condolences on his passing.
Thank you very much for that, Cody. He is very much missed.
Yeah.
So, before I start crying again, how are you staying cool?
Basically, any way that I can, like trying to open a window or anything to get air, because I don't have an air conditioner. So
Right.
I'm basically and I know that and with trail we don't really have places where you can, like, we don't have what they call the cooling centers.
Right. So
we have a lack of cooling centers, and with the homeless population that we have in trail, we're basically we're struggling, like, and the city of Trail don't offer anything, so.
And I am very sorry that you're having such a difficult time, and that others in the
I'm a 38-year-old individual with serious developmental diverse abilities, and even with 40-degree, 50-degree heat like we had in 2021 in Lytton when it was 49.6. If you're out in the heat and you don't even have any form of protection, whether it's sunscreen, you die. Like you could literally be dead within 5 seconds.
Yeah, it is
pretty much
very dangerous. Cody,
Yeah, I think that the best thing is to have your loved ones call and check in on you, or get an air conditioner, or take up the offers if there are offers, like Fortis sometimes makes offers. Take advantage of them while you can.
Cody, I appreciate your call today, and I hope that you can find some relief from the heat and stay safe. Thank you.
Yeah, and I hope, and I offer my condolences again on the passing of Rick.
And I sincerely appreciate that. Thank you so much, Cody. And of course, BC continued to set heat records over the weekend. Ashcroft was the hottest place in Canada on Sunday with 40.3 degrees, and Lytton set a new daily record of 39.9 degrees, beating the previous record of 38.8 degrees in 1953. But as we've just heard, not everyone is protected from the heat, particularly the elderly and those that are homeless. So what are your tips for keeping vulnerable people safe from the heat? Call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining me now is Pastor Ward Draper, founder and executive director of the 5 and 2 Ministries. Hi, Pastor. Thanks for joining me.
Not a problem, Amy.
So this is the first serious heat wave of the summer. What are the conditions like for the people in your community?
Well, they're the same as, almost every year that we've had experienced these extreme weather. We have increased services, more so than we had, say, a few years ago. We have several more outreach agencies throughout Abbotsford engaging with our folks outside. So those are some good improvements. But it's the usual, trying to find a spot to stay cool, trying to find a place that you're not going to get harassed at. A lot of our friends pretty much slow down and don't really come out of hiding. They stay where they can stay cool for as much as possible.
But that can be difficult as well. People that are perhaps struggling with the heat and trying to find an area to themselves, they may not realize that they're in danger without somebody to sort of check in on them. Are you finding that it's more difficult to access people to check in on them right now?
It's not so much difficult. It's just that we have so many folks outside now. It's just hard trying to cover everybody as efficiently.
Right.
I mean, most of our folks outside are well versed in the dangers. It's just trying to cover the hundreds of folks that we have on our streets in our city. And then, of course, the geographical size of Abbotsford also makes it a challenge now that we have homeless people, members living from one end to the other of a city that's 400 square kilometers almost.
Right.
So it does get challenging to try to cover as many as possible. You try to do what you can, but it's truly insurmountable in some ways.
how do you convince someone, that they need to go to a cooling center, or that they may need medical help? What if they're in a position where they don't trust the, authority? What if they're fearful of seeking out help? How can you sort of encourage them and make sure they are taken care of?
Well, you try to encourage them, of course. You're like, maybe you should go to the library and cool off today, or head over to the water station over by the hub or something. But a lot of folks just don't want to leave, and I get that. I
Hmm.
mean, it's their home, like don't want to leave. So our usual solution is just leave a flat of water with them, and tell them that if you start feeling off, get a hold of somebody. You know, but these are real challenges that every city faces in North America
Yeah.
pretty much these days. So it's not unique. You just do what you can. Most folks are well versed in what's available, and you just try to do what you can. Like, most of the time these days with dealing with folks outside, you're really just doing a lot more triage than problem solving these days. You're really just trying to keep people alive, be it during the summer
Right.
or the winters or anywhere between. And as I said, programs and services are improving, but our social problems are growing much faster.
And what do you want people to know about the ones that you take care of, the people that you're helping? What do you want the greater message to be, just so somebody understands the situation that they're in and how dangerous it can be?
Well, it's complicated to do that. That's a big answer. I mean, the reality is we need as a society to find ways to start helping our neighbors more,
Hmm.
and engaging and trying to be that help that's needed. If you're comfortable with it, like I've said many times over the years on CBC and other places, like during these heat waves, throw a couple flats of water in your car, spend the $8 at Superstore, and if you're comfortable, you see somebody out on the streets, ask them if they want water.
Yeah.
That bare minimum, start with those things. I mean, briefly, like one thing I'd like to share is like I saw a great example in Morocco last summer during their heat wave where it was well over 40.
Hmm.
I was in Tangier, and one of the things I really appreciated about that community was with those heat waves like that, you'd walk through the streets of the city, and people had water jugs and pitchers on their front stoops in the front of their yards with cups available for anybody to use.
Incredible.
So their neighbors didn't get dehydrated. You could wander through and there'd be like water available everywhere. We could do things like that. We
Yeah.
can find ways to be that engaged with our community, because it's not just our friends outside. It's the seniors, it's the people with diabetes, it's people with, mobility challenges. There's so many people that could be helped, that we could find a way to be more compassionate to the people living around us.
Absolutely, it's such a wonderful point, and it is those that are most vulnerable that need help the most during these extreme heat events in the summer and the winter. We'll take a call now from Keith in Pemberton. Hi, Keith. How are you?
Hot, very
I
hot.
can imagine. How are
Yeah,
you trying to deal with the heat?
Say it again, sorry?
How are you managing with the heat?
Good, not bad at all, actually. I'm up here now, and, it's 33, I think, and of course it's, the humidex. Sometimes I find the news, people want to scare you with the weather to some extent, but, with wind chill and then the heat, the humidex, but it probably feels about 38 up here. It is quite warm. A couple of things that I've realized a couple of years ago with the heat dome is parking garages in our condo. I went down last night to pick something up, and it was incredibly much cooler. I've got good airflow. I'm lucky.
Yeah.
But I went downstairs, and it was probably 5-7 degrees cooler, so that was great. Another thing, plenty of ice cream. There's been no studies on that, but ice cream does help. And also support the lemonade kids. There's kids out there selling lemonade and freezies, and
Yep.
always have a little change in your pocket for them as well. So it's important. But yeah, talk to your neighbors. Lastly, your wrists and your ankles. I learned this 10, 15 years ago. It's crazy how, I guess it's because of the blood flow with regards to circulation.
Mhm.
If you put ice just around your wrists and your ankles, you cool down within 5 minutes. It's kind of crazy. I didn't really believe it at first,
Wow.
but it's just wild how your wrists, if you just wrap yourself up with a towel with some ice cubes, and you just instantly cool down. So It's pretty amazing.
I'm gonna have to try that after the show. Thanks so much for the tip, Keith, and for calling
But
in.
again, more ice cream.
And more ice cream. Ice cream is quite often the answer to many problems in life.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for your
Take
time.
care. And we'll get a call now from Greg in Ashcroft. Hi, Greg.
Well, g'day, Amy. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Hey, it's not just people that suffer from this heat. It's also animals. We run a guest ranch up here in Ashcroft, and we don't do afternoon rides with our horses or the guests and whatnot because it's just too hot for them up here. So we do what we call an evening ride, so they don't go out till like 7, 8 o'clock in the evening when it's nice and cooled off somewhat. They don't get back till about 9:30, 10 o'clock. But it's the animals too that suffer as well. So we just make sure we provide lots of clean water for them and shade, which we do provide, and it's also the cattle that we have here. You make sure they're in a pasture where they have trees, because that's where they seem to congregate, right, in these hot weathers. And make sure, again, they have access to water. So, it's not just people, but it's also the animals that do suffer.
That is an incredibly valid point, and thank you for making it. Pastor, that actually brings me to a question I did want to ask. Many people that are experiencing homelessness, they have pets with them that are beloved, that they don't want to be parted from. Those animals can also be impacted by the extreme heat, but at times that maybe they don't want to leave their animals to go to these cooling centers. Have you seen that happening at all?
Not too frequently, because most of the cooling stations that we've had, there's a greater level of accessibility, or they can pop in real quick and leave the pets with somebody outside. So it hasn't been a great hurdle.
Okay.
It's just keeping enough bottles of water on hand to fill up a bowl. And that's a bit of thing. So like when we do our outreach or do our dinners, we have to make sure we have extra water always, just to try to cover as many bases as we can. And I love that one gentleman's point about supporting the kids. That's a great thing. Go crazy, folks. Do that.
I think we could all support each other a little bit more these days. Looking forward, sort of long term, what sort of supports would you like to see, perhaps from the government, to help out people during these difficult times?
I think we lean a little bit too heavy on the government at times, any level. They have their place. But I think, like all our social issues, that's one of the crux of the reasons that we're not moving ahead, is we keep leaning too heavily on these folks that are most often detached from day-to-day living. This is why we as individuals need to find ways to participate with greater frequency. And so, like, instead of, if you feel comfortable enough, maybe set up a water station in your neighborhood, yourself.
Right.
If you're comfortable with that, or bring some friends along and do that yourself. If you're in a neighborhood that has high populations of different vulnerable groups, these are ways to really address these problems, to solve a lot of issues and bridge a lot of gaps in our communities and our society. We need to figure out ways to be compassionate to each other and not rely on our governments, because as we know, they fail frequently and are usually many years behind. Their help is welcome and appreciated. But a lot of this really lies on us as an individual to find ways to participate.
People just need to take the initiative themselves and keep an eye out for everybody around them to make sure everybody's doing okay.
Yes.
Pastor, I thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you're able to stay safe in the heat and that everybody around you is able to do so as well.
All right. Thank you, Amy.
Pastor Ward Draper, founder and executive director of the 5 and 2 Ministries. And this is BC Today on CBC. We're on Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on our website, cbc.ca/BC, YouTube at CBC Vancouver, and on the CBC News app. The 12:30 news now with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. As we've been hearing on the show, a heat wave is pushing temperatures above 40 degrees in parts of BC, where nearly 24 daily temperatures fell yesterday. A summary from Environment Canada shows 22 daily high records fell across the province, including one that had stood for almost 120 years. Cache Creek was the hotspot with a daily high of 40.3 degrees. The BC Wildfire Service says the hot, dry conditions are raising the risk of wildfire activity. An update from the service says the heat wave is expected to persist until Wednesday, when a new weather pattern is forecast to bring high winds and the potential for thunderstorms with dry lightning strikes. There are 96 fires considered active in BC, with 6 new fire starts in the last 24 hours. And homicide investigators are now looking into a suspicious death Friday in Hope. A 46-year-old Chilliwack man was found dead. Police have released few other details. And now the forecast. The heat warnings continue for most of the province for several days, with highs into the 40s in some areas. On the north coast, sunny this afternoon with a high of 18, highs reaching 32 with widespread smoke in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, sunny with a high of 33, highs up to 38 degrees with sunshine in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, sunny with a high of 38 as well. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, warm and sunny with highs up to 33 inland. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Thank you very much, Rob. Now, Rob, stick around for just a second. I want to read you an email that we received from Michael. And it says, it's wise to have a hobby or something to actually do that takes one's mind off of the heat. Reading, drawing, crosswords, sewing, knitting, making, or building something. He didn't mention tennis, though. How's the game going in the heat?
If you play early enough, it's not that hot.
Is that how you're handling it, or do you actually take a break during a heat wave?
No, I don't take a break. No, just played 6:45 this morning. It's beautiful.
That's
good
the way
temperature.
to do it.
I don't know what the temperature was, but it wasn't that hot.
It's hot enough.
Pardon me?
It's definitely hotter now.
It was hot, but it wasn't overbearing.
Well, as long as you can still play tennis.
And I wear a hat, Amy.
Oh, of course you do.
Yeah.
I expect no less, and some sunscreen.
Yes, less of that, but I wear a hat.
All right. Thank you very much, Robert. And of course, if you have any quick hints or ideas of how to stay cool during this heat and how to look after those that are most vulnerable around us, we'd love to know. You can call us at 604-669-3733, 604-669-3733, or 1-800-825-5950. And you can always email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. And thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on the CBC News app and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. And if you have ever spent time on the islands that dot the Salish Sea, you have no doubt been touched by their serenity and their sheer beauty. Our next guest has been instrumental in protecting those islands and encouraging environmental conservation right around BC. So we want to know, what local environmental community projects are you involved in? Call us 1-800-825 5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone, and you can email bctoday@cbc.ca. Sheila Harrington is a longtime environmental advocate and author of the book Voices for the Islands, and she joins us now. Hello, Sheila. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Sure. Hi. On this hot day.
It is a very hot day, yes. A perfect day to be out on your sail or out on your boat, which I'm assuming you spend plenty of time on.
Yes, actually, I've been getting it ready for a tour I'm going to go on in August.
Oh, fabulous. So tell us about this connection you have to the Salish Sea and to its islands.
Sure. Well, I'm living here all my adult life, and I've been working in conservation for the last 30 years through land trusts. And so one of my mentors, John Scull, who founded the Cowichan Community Land Trust, suddenly died a few years ago. And it woke me up to this idea that we need to record the stories of many of these founders on these small community land trusts on the islands.
And tell me more about the Land Trust Alliance of BC, because you were instrumental in developing that many, many years ago.
Yes, I was the founding ED, and that started kind of the same time as a lot of these community land trusts started in the late 90s. And so that was a province-wide organization that still exists today. I'm not working for them now. I'm associated with my local land trust, the Skeety Island Conservancy.
Okay. And how has, you've been doing this for quite some time. How have conservation efforts sort of, I guess, changed and been implemented, over the last, decades that you've been involved with it? What have you seen sort of shift?
Oh, all kinds of things. I mean, in the late 90s, some of the first land trusts, smaller land trusts in BC were founded on Galliano, on Denman, on Pender. And since then, these land trusts have protected thousands of hectares on the islands. And so it's a movement that's just taken on 30 years.
And you spent 3 years, I believe, sort of sailing around the islands. You talked to dozens and dozens of conservationists. What were some of their, I guess, key concerns?
Oh, their key concerns, of course, are protection of our dwindling habitats that we have on the islands. Most of the islands are in the Douglas fir ecosystem, and believe it or not, we have less than 1% of that ecosystem left intact that is, older growth, and less than 9% that's protected. So they're very concerned about that. I mean, originally some of the islands were threatened by logging, and today the threats are more of development, of people coming here, often from other places far away, and sometimes they just, clear the land and then think they're starting fresh. But unfortunately, that has major impacts on all the land around them, and of course all the wildlife that depends on that habitat. So those are kind of the two primary concerns. And then a third one, of course, is the marine life in the Salish Sea, with all the impacts that are happening there, with the new pipeline come in, with the freighters that are hanging around because the Vancouver port is full. And they're anchoring around the islands. And then there's the new container port that, we're all very concerned about. More and more ships out there that impact especially the whales, but all the marine life.
And we'd love to have people join our conversation today. If you want to talk about a conservation effort that's being made in your local area, or one that you would like to see getting back up, please call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And you can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. My guest today is Sheila Harrington, author of the book Voices for the Islands. Sheila, obviously you've been to so many islands. Are there any little hidden gems that maybe people don't know, that don't have quite, we hear about Salt Spring in Maine, and these are the ones that a lot of people recognize, but are there more sort of hidden gems that are worth looking at?
Well, they're all beautiful, and they're all very unique, and they all have something that is associated with some of the concerns on those islands. Right. Galliano, I wanted to bring up. Galliano was one of the first islands to form a land trust, and today they have moved from originally just trying to protect the land, acquire the land, put covenants on the lands, and today they've got such a range of projects which might stimulate some of your listeners. They have a water conservation rebate, so that they're encouraging people to get water cisterns to collect water. They have environmental education programs. They bring in interns from around the world. They have a sustainable food systems program, and all of that is in addition to acquiring land, caring for the land. So they're very diverse in what they're doing.
And You mentioned earlier sort of one of the greatest risks, that we're still seeing is of development. As we're
Yes.
struggling in so many areas with having enough housing, is this something that you do have concerns about, that inevitably we're going to see that push out to the islands that we're seeing in so many other areas?
Oh, it's already happening. Maine, for example, since 2016 to 2021, had a 36% increase in their population. It's happening on all the islands. It's happening as far up as Cortez Island, the whole coast. And of course, that's pushing up the prices, but it's definitely affecting the habitats. We have a goal of 30% protection by 2030 in the world. It's an international goal. And so we've kind of got to step up our pace and protect these habitats while they're still there.
As you said, it's already happening, and perhaps it is inevitable. So, what do people need to be aware of if they were making that choice and thinking that this is something they would like to do, that they wanted to perhaps pursue living on an island? What are some ways they could make sure they're being respectful and helping with conservation efforts in the areas?
Sure, yeah. Well, the first thing is to learn about the land that they've moved to and they live in. Take a little time before you start developing. There was a book out many years ago that has just lost my mind there, the name of that book. But anyway, the whole idea is that take at least a year so you can see all the seasons go through and get to know the land before you start thinking about developing it. Protect any trees or riparian areas along the property. Those are essential. Native plants. Chickadees, for example, require 300 caterpillars a day to feed their babies. And so they feed on native plants. So it's really important to take the time to learn what's native, what isn't, before you start bringing in other plants. Get out in nature and learn about it and get involved with your local conservancy or land trust. It's exciting to learn about nature and wildlife, the tides, the weather. It's really exciting to really connect with where you live.
And how would somebody, go about getting connected with these efforts and establishing something perhaps in their own community?
Well, we go to the web, go to Google, go to your phone book, find out what conservancy or land trust is there. There is one on every one of the major islands on the Salish Sea.
We're going to take a call now from Lynn in Victoria. Hi, Lynn.
Hi there, Amy and guests. This is just bringing to the audience's awareness, if Amy, you haven't brought it up already. I just want to commend the village of Tofino for their conservation efforts in water use, lowering the water use, educating the people on the fact that there is a drought happening. And I think this is something that I would love to see from top to toe of Vancouver Island, because water is not a finite element at all. And we only need to look at places around the world where water is so scarce, and yet we squander it here. So, Tofino, congratulations. You're a mover and a shaker.
Shout out to Tofino. Thank you so much for that call, Lynn.
You're welcome. Bye now.
Goodbye. Sheila, do you find in sort of the nature of conservation, do things sort of, I guess, not to say become more popular, but, as Lynn just mentioned, water conservation and being in a drought, that's something that gets a lot of attention. And years ago, it was clear-cut forestry that was getting a lot of attention. Does it sometimes, do certain things sort of fall out of favor, that things that people just stop being interested in?
Well, certainly with conservation, it's something that's just been increasing. I mean,
That's
people
great.
are becoming more and more aware of what's going on in the world with climate change and the biodiversity loss and the species extinction that is we're undergoing right now. And so I think people are waking up and they're wanting to do something about it. And of course, I wrote the book for that purpose, not only just to record the history of these organizations and what each of them are doing now, but just to raise awareness about how we need to conserve nature.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. We have another call on the line. Christine in Burnaby. Good afternoon, Christine.
Hello there. Hi.
And so, are there any conservation efforts that you want to highlight or that you're involved in?
Well, currently I'm involved in with a group of local citizens to try and protect the Deer Lake herons.
Yes.
There's 69 heron nests at Deer Lake, and the city has decided that it wants to build childcare facilities in the herons buffer zone.
Mm-hmm.
So the heronry has a road on two sides, and so one of the other sides that doesn't have a road really is that's where they're planning to build the new facilities. But by cutting down trees there, they're exposing the birds to more predation by other birds like eagles and so on. And they're taking away the protective zone for the herons. So we think that there must be a better place for them to put the childcare facilities.
I thank you for highlighting that. We've actually covered that in the past, and Sheila, it brought up a good point when we sort of first heard about this story. That it makes people feel like they have to choose between saving these herons, but also it's for a childcare space that is so desperately needed in that area. Do people come up against those sort of, what can they throw their weight behind? Is it difficult sometimes to make that choice?
Yeah, sure. It can be difficult to make that choice. And of course, the number one thing is before these projects go ahead is to look at where's an area that's already impacted that they can choose, as opposed to an area, especially like this, where you've got endangered herons that are going to be impacted. So yeah, it's number one, whoever is designing the project or coming up with the project to look at an area that's already been impacted. And there are a lot of those around the province. So and in our communities. So it's like looking at those areas first. And then of course, thinking about adding on to existing buildings or renovating existing buildings instead of making. So that's kind of stuff I think up there.
You just dropped your Zoom just dropped out at the end there a little bit, so we didn't quite catch the last bit of what you were saying. I'm sure it was fabulous.
Oh, well, I was just suggesting that, these at the initial design stage of these projects, that you make sure that it's an area that is not going to infect these kinds of wildlife, because it's up to us right now, really, with this big development boom we're going through, to really consider where we are doing these projects and to make sure they're not going to wipe out a whole heron colony, for example.
Right, of course. Getting back to the islands, of course, and the wonderful book that you wrote, describing them all, and they all have their sort of unique magic. What are some things about the islands that most people perhaps don't recognize, or is there a common thread that sort of runs through all of the islands?
Well, I think there is a common thread that runs through the islands, and that is a lot of people who live here care deeply about nature. With the people moving here today, it may take them a little while to come to that place. It was certainly true for myself when I first moved here in my teenage years. It took me quite a long time to learn about everything. And up on Cortes Island in the book, I describe conservation covenants, and they're a really good tool that people can use if they have a bit of land and they've got a riparian area, a wetland, a forested area. They can protect that area and still live on their land by using this tool, conservation covenant. So that's something that I hope people can know about, and if they don't know about it, they can certainly McDougall Conservation Covenant, and in Colombia, the legal ability for that to happen came about in 1994. So just like earlier, you were asking about kind of the trajectory. The trajectory has just been going up, thank goodness.
It is good to hear. And in terms of, sort of raising up the next generation, how do we sort of impress, right from when they're little on kids to sort of have that respect for the land and sort of lead them into that sort of path of conservation? Any tips or tricks?
Well, I think it's just like in education generally, we have to model things. And so I think if the parents is modeling, going out on walks, learning about the birds in their areas, there's a couple of great apps that anybody can use. One's called Mainland, which is a bird app. Another one's called Seek, which will identify plants. You just put your phone there and it'll tell you which plant you're looking at. And with Mainland, you turn it on, it'll tell you what bird you just heard. So there's all kinds of really nice, cool ways to learn about nature that you can do with your kids. So that would help them come along and learn more about the places that they live and care.
Yeah, making it fun. It's also fun for adults. I've used that bird call one a number of times. It's like Shazam for birds. It's quite fascinating. Were you always sort of conservation minded even when you were growing up, or is this something that sort of developed as you got older? Really?
Yeah, no, I wasn't. I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, and so I grew up in a city, and so it wasn't something I was aware of until I moved to the coast in my teenage years, and then I just started seeing nature kind of getting developed, getting logged. I just started seeing loss, and so I started to wake up and kind of go, okay, I want to learn about it and I want to protect it.
All right, and when you were sort of first getting involved in it, what were some of the people like that you were working with? It seems like it was a very grassroots movement.
Yes, in many regards, it is a grassroots movement, although in the province, there are 4 province-wide land trusts in addition to all the local community land trusts. Now, you're asking about the people. Well, it's a broad range, although something that kind of struck me when I was interviewing people was 2 things. One was most of them, they'd, drive to meet me because I'm in a bay on my boat. So they'd come to meet me. And most of them were in electric cars or they were in, hybrid cars. And that kind of struck me as, they're living their values.
Yeah.
And then the second thing that struck me was so many of them had protested in Clayoquot Sound. And so after that, they went home to their island and looked around and said, what's happening here that we need to protect? And what are the threats here?
And it seems that it almost has that snowballing effect when people are involved in an effort and they see that it could have an impact. They tend to sort of shift their focus and see where else they can continue to have that impact.
Yes, that's right.
I want to thank you so much for joining us today, Sheila. It was just a delight to talk to you, and going through your book. I have so many wonderful memories of going to Main Island when I was growing up. My grandmother had a place there, and just reading about all of the various efforts and how much care people have put into keeping these islands in such magical places to go. So I appreciate your efforts in that as well.
And actually about Main Island.
Oh, yes.
I hadn't said, and Maine and Pender and Galiano, a number of islands now, Thetis, are all doing this walkabout program that they offer new landowners. So they can get in touch with the Conservancy and say that, I've just moved here. I'd like to know more about my land. Will you walk with me? And so they go and do a walkabout with the new owner. It's a very valuable thing.
Oh, that is fabulous. I love that idea. Thank you for passing that along. And of course, if anyone would like a copy of Voices for the Islands, you can email us for a chance to win a book, bctoday@cbc.ca. And that was my chat with environmental advocate and author of Voices for the Islands, Sheila Harrington. And this weekend, Surrey hosted the 2nd annual Gatka Championship, a revered martial arts competition in the Sikh community. As Shatari reports, participants say the sport is helping young Sikhs carry on the legacy of their ancestors.
Young fighters from around the world face each other at the Akhada, the practice ground. Wielding a wooden shaft in one hand and a leather shield in another, the aim is to land the most hits on your opponent. The ancient tradition of Gatka dates back to the 17th century. It was first developed to defend the Sikh community in North India against invaders.
This education of weaponry for battlefield combat to stand up against oppression, against the imperial state of the Mughals of the time.
23-year-old Gurman Kaur says she has been training for years. It's a way for her to connect with her heritage.
It's honestly a really big discipline. I would say it's 90% a mind game and 10% physical. It's all about, you're seeing your opponent, where you can hit.
Gatka was introduced in BC in the early 2000s when the first ever Gatka school opened in Surrey. Now there are dozens of schools and hundreds of practitioners or Gatkabas across the lower mainland.
We come from a bloodline of warriors and our forefathers, and just like our lineages.
Singh says the martial arts form has become a popular sport for many in the Sikh community. Traditionally fought by sword, these days competitions use wooden sticks to spar.
Gatka is having a moment across the world right now.
This weekend, more than 160 competitors representing schools from Canada and the US came together for the second annual Damdara Gatka competition in Surrey, including fighters from a Gatka school in Seattle.
We've been teaching Gatka there for about, 15 to 18 years.
He says the sport has helped young Sikh Canadians carry on the legacy of their ancestors.
Gatka is more of a tradition, it's more of a culture. It connects us to our roots.
Saurabh Chetri, CBC News, Surrey.
And last week, we shared the sad news with you that Rick Cluff, who for many years hosted the early edition here in Vancouver on CBC, had passed away at the age of 74. And the tributes from our audience members continue to come in. David writes, "I'm very sad to hear news of Rick Cluff's death. I am remembering him fondly, going way back to when I was in the interior and he was the sports guy. I was never a sports guy, but I really enjoyed Rick. Then he became the morning guy, dark and early, while I lived in the Fraser Valley. I never knew or met him, but he's one of my favorites, and I miss his voice and personality still." And from Bev, "Listening to your show, I'm sitting here with a lump in my throat. He was a great radio personality whom I started each and every morning with as I prepared my family and myself for our day for so many years. When he left the morning show, I'm not going to lie, I was a little put out to think that he would not be a part of my day. He will be very fondly remembered by so many people, and his loss will be felt across our country."